Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions throughout the state. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today we're fortunate to have as our guest Harry Sandler. Harry is one of the co-founders, and he now serves as the vice president of the Music Museum of New England, which, as of now, is an online virtual museum dedicated to preserving, honoring, and showcasing New England's musical heritage. During the program, we'll be finding out why and how the Music Museum of New England came about, what it has to offer, hear about some of its current and upcoming plans, as well as find out how those of you watching and others can become involved with this exciting endeavor. Let's start by meeting Harry and then finding out about the museum. Welcome, Harry.
Well, nice to be here. Thank you.
Really delighted you're able to join us.
Our pleasure.
Before we find out about the Music Museum of New England, I think it would be of interest, and there's a nice connection and segue to hear a little bit about your background and then how that led to your creation of this.
Sure. I've been in the entertainment business now for 52 years.
Fabulous.
I started years ago as a musician. I was fortunate enough to be in a band that recorded 3 albums back in the 60s and did lots of tours. A fine young man.
Most definitely.
With a full head of hair. Yes. And actually that was the days of 8 tracks. So this goes back quite a long way, this band Orpheus. We had a number of hits and toured extensively. And the band broke up and I continued on in the entertainment business where I've done a plethora of jobs from management to agency representation, etc., etc.
So skipping way ahead then up to the present or recent present with the genesis of this type of museum, the Music Museum.
Sure.
How did it come about? Who was involved?
Right. There was a project that a number of us got involved with back about 11 or 12 years ago in an advisory capacity. And we were involved with trying to help them formulate and grow it and build it. And it reached its apex, if you will, and it dissolved. And it was primarily focused on rock and roll and in Boston. And so maybe a month or two after the project broke up, the advisory group got together and said, gee, there seems to be a bigger mission statement here. The music of New England and all of the music as opposed to a location and one genre of music. Thus, the Music Museum of New England was born, and we became a fully federally recognized not-for-profit, and we've been going strong for a little over 10 years.
And then how did you begin and how did it develop just the creation and the accumulation of what's there, which for those who haven't had a chance to visit the website yet, they can look back at the monitor and see homepage and then we'll explain that a little more.
I mean, you know, it starts with a vision, but that vision continues to morph. And so we put up a web page, which was, I mean, 10 years ago, it wasn't even as extensive as it is now. Everything, everyone has a web page. 10 years ago, it was growing. And so we put up a web page and we started to import stuff into it. We found a couple of people, I should say a couple of people found us, and they have been our web team ever since then and play a huge part in making this project what it is. So it's morphed. This is the 3rd iteration of this particular website, mmone.org, Music Museum of New England.org.
Who have been some of your colleagues in this endeavor and the various roles that you've all played?
In our advisory panel that we have now, Don Law, who is one of the premier concert
Most
promoters, not
definitely.
only in New England, but throughout North America, is an advisor and a champion of this project and has been a supporter. Various musicians, various people that are actually archivists. There is one of our board members is he has extensive archives. I mean, 200, 300 flats of archives, boxes of stuff, and he liked what we're doing, and he wanted to be a part of it, and so he's been a part of it. Agents have come on board, and so you have your board of directors, and then you also have your advisory people that kind of help us that we can turn to when we need something.
You know, like any innovation that goes through different iterative processes, how about the website over the last 10, 11 years? What are some of the major changes to where we have today?
Well, I mean, it didn't start off with that piano key on the side. It was a lot cleaner, and once the software was developed that made it easier for our web team, then they continued to plug and play, so to speak. They took the various fields and they were able to populate them with various, each of these particular topics that we've arrived at that we think are worth preserving.
And then is there a core team that goes about deciding what the content is, or how does that get established?
There kind of is, it's a core team. I've taken on the process of populating this site a lot. I spend a lot of time outreaching to writers, to artists, and getting people to write things for us. And the team is actually two men who are young guys in their 30s or 40s, and although that's not that young anymore, I guess, right? It's all relative.
Perspective.
It's all relative, right, you know. and so, you know, when I reach out to writers, I try to work with them and nurture them and guide them and direct them to give us 400 or 500 words on a particular artist. Then it's easy to find data to support that, links or artwork, home pages. We have had over time people that were volunteers as to find each of those things. So I kind of was overseer of everything and giving it off to various people to do their job, and depending on who's available, that's how it's remained. It's a very small group, although the writer group is growing, because when I see somebody who has written a memory of something, I outreach to them. I outreach to them and say, that's a great story. How would you like to write a story for the Music Museum of New England? And they look at what we're doing, and the next thing we know, we have a story about a venue that doesn't exist, or a band that stopped being a functioning band 40 years ago, and that's kind of the way it's grown.
I know we're jumping ahead by referring to this, but since you mentioned it, you have that wonderful page, You Too,
right,
where you're open to people's reflections about
Absolutely.
experiences that they've had to share with others.
Right. You know, the way I look at this is it's not really my museum. I mean, I always kind of look at people, look on the camera here, and I look out to the audience. I say, this is really your museum. This isn't my museum. I'm going to be the overseer, but someday somebody else is going to pick up this torch and run with it. So given that it's your museum, we ask if there's something that you would like to tell the world, so that when somebody logs onto this site in Tokyo looking to find out about Aerosmith, they suddenly find out that there's more than Aerosmith here in New England, and they say, oh my God. So people have been writing in stories of concerts they've been to, bands that they followed, favorite concerts, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how it's kind of worked.
Well, speaking of Aerosmith, let's move on to the first page we have up here, Artist, which we do see Aerosmith because it's alphabetically.
It is alpha, right.
Can you give us a sense of the range of performers that you have on, say, this page?
Yeah, you know, it started, like I said, with being rock and roll, but music of New England is very broad. So there you have your jazz artists, but we've actually also identified and have a page on a drum and fife corps that is well over 150 years old. I don't think they have any of the same members, though. And it's
Perhaps
150 years old that is still playing at musters all over New England when there's a historical
Sure.
situation. So we have identified all of these people that have in bands that have come from New England. I mean, Leonard Bernstein came from New England,
Oh,
from
yeah.
Lowell, and he morphed down to New York and was highly successful, as we know. But there's a lot of artists that are very similar to that have started here, that have gone on. And so it's everything. It's pop, it's folk, it's jazz, it's hip hop. We don't want to leave anybody out, but it takes time. And I know that I was looking, actually, there's hundreds of pages of artists now.
Wow.
And there's a large number of YouTube stories that people over the years have submitted us. I mean, from somebody being in the front row when The Who previewed Tommy at a club that is no longer existing called the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, these are stories that are worth reading.
Definitely, definitely. And there was just big anniversary for the Tea Party.
There was. The Boston Tea Party was a club in the late 60s that was in the Fillmore mentality genre, lights that went like this and loud and everybody having a great time, but bands that would later go on to be iconic in nature.
Yeah.
Fleetwood Mac, Velvet Underground played there, Led Zeppelin played there, The Who played there.
Nice.
I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. And these were just clubs, and they came in and played for 3 days for no money. And on Thursday, nobody knew who The Who was. Word of mouth through various mediums spread, and on Friday you had a good house, and then Saturday it was packed and sold out, and that's how a band would start. And they had a circuit of those types of clubs that these bands played at that time, Tea Party being one of them.
And just to point out to viewers on this page and the others too, it's not just listings but hot links. So if you hit on it, you can find wonderful information.
Well, what we've tried to do is give as much information. Maybe the artist has a home page, maybe the artist has a Wikipedia page, fan pages, interviews. I just put something up today, but I realized if you're not actually a member, if you don't have a subscription to the Globe, you can't access the article. But where we can, we'll take an article and we'll put that link in there so that the credibility of the artist that is continuing to get attention continues to grow.
And just to reiterate, this spans the 6 New England states.
It does.
That's
it
fabulous.
does. I mean, I guess one of the things that this site is lacking is people from other states that are contributing information about their venues, or the people that were behind the scenes that were responsible, or the bands that, I mean, I'm still looking for somebody to write about the band Fish from Burlington, Vermont.
Oh, sure.
I mean, great band.
Right.
But unless I can find somebody to write about it, I can't put up a page. So when you click on each one of these pictures here, it goes to every one of these bands, and there's something about each one of them that is worth knowing. As a matter of fact, just as a short aside, this band, the Art of Lovin' right here, they put out one album in the 60s, and nobody would really know about this band unless you read the bio, because the sax player in the band was a guy that went on to form a very large furniture store chain, Barry Tatelman from Jordan's.
For sure.
So, I mean, that's part of what we do, is we drill down and we try to find out about the heritage and see where these people were, and if they're continuing on, give them credit.
For sure, for sure. Well, let's move on to see what's under places. And here we highlight just a number of venues over the years.
Right, the venues, all important venues, each one of them. I mean, we 15 Lansdowne Street, the Tea Party, the Cambridge Common Concerts. The Cambridge Common Concerts was a series of concerts in the late 60s that took place on the Commons right over there, and they were big. Nobody paid anything, and there were 2,000 people out there having a good time, enjoying the day and listening to music. The Channel went out of
Yeah,
business.
yeah.
Club 47, Passim, that's still
Yeah.
around. The Hampton Beach Casino is still around. Intermedia Sound Studios, we just put that up there a week ago, actually. The Jazz Workshop, Paul's Mall, was a very, very, very important, a hugely important venue that we're proud that it's up there. You know, and some of these places actually, it dovetails to one of the other sites. I'm not sure if you captured that screen, but the Music Trail. So what we have done is we have gotten a grant from Music Drives Us, and we are putting markers on locations primarily in the Boston area, because that's where we're at this particular point, you know. And these are places that have been worthy of note of having done something. The original Boston Tea Party, we put a marker up there maybe 10 years ago. Lansdowne Street behind Fenway Park. And the Aerosmith apartment was where they started playing back in 1972. And we actually got the city to participate, and we shut down Commonwealth Ave and brought in 3 flatbed trucks, and Aerosmith played, and there were 35,000 people on Commonwealth Ave. And there's now a historical marker on the building commemorating that this location is where they started.
Fabulous, fabulous. And we mentioned people like Don Law and the wonderful Music Biz page.
Right.
What do you cover in that?
People that are behind the scenes. I mean, so if we look at Angus Studios, that is a studio that Andy Pratt first recorded at. Amphion was a management company that actually managed a large grouping of artists in the late 60s that went on to great renown. Daddy's Junkie Music Stores were music stores all over. There were, I think, 37 or 40 stores in the New England area. Dinky Dawson was a very well-known sound man. Vic Firth is a percussionist who has had his own line of sticks. So each one of these have been behind the scenes.
Yeah, so
I mean,
rich.
without these people, Charlie McKenzie. This is a guy that was a promo man for Warner Brothers Records who heard a demo, and he took that demo and he went to his friend in California who came from West Roxbury, and they listened to it, they loved it, and the next thing you know, the band Boston has their first album that is the biggest selling freshman album ever. 18 million records sold in that first record.
You know, as I hear you exuberantly speak about these different sections, I think this whole museum serves so many generations. For people like us, bringing back connections and some memories and learning even more, but for people more modern day age, wonderful historic resource to learn about just the history of music over time here.
I think so. I think that limitations, because again, it's all volunteer driven. I don't want this, we don't want this to just be a site that is commemorating the 60s. I mean, okay, that's, you know, 60s were rich and wonderful, but the criteria for inclusion in this site is that you had to have done something in the music business professionally 15 years ago and back. So from 2002 back, I mean, I'm trying to find writers that are willing to submit pieces on bands that maybe made an album or two that didn't go very far from the 90s or from the 80s. You know, so it goes back as far from 2002 back. I mean, we're at 2017 now. So it's like as far back as we can go. If we can find somebody to write about it, we'll find the artwork to go with the article and put it up there.
Nice, nice. Well, let's move on and share the next page where you highlight different people in the media and a lot of well-known names.
Very important. I mean, look, it's synergistic. The whole thing is without the DJs, without the managers, without the labels, without the studios, the artists are just playing in their basement or their garage. So when you put out an album like what we did with the Orpheus album way back in those days, that album got picked up and played considerably by Arnie Ginsberg,
Oh,
by
yeah.
Dick Summer, by Dave Maynard. These people were the first DJs that really got onto the pop music of the time. There were, every city had them. You know, Cousin Brucey in New
Yes.
York. There were, you know, every city had them, and these guys championed what we all were doing, and they played our music. So without playing the music, and it's different today. The radio stations have changed. It's
Most
all
definitely.
internet-based.
Yeah.
The record labels don't even exist like they did back then. So without these guys and the part that they played, and people like Arnie Ginsberg and people like Bob Clayton, they would go and do record hops at high schools and at CYOs. Now, your viewers, I'm not sure how many of them even know what a CYO is. A CYO, the Catholic Youth Organization, where the kids went on a Friday night and they had dances.
Yeah.
And Bob Clayton or Dick Summer or Arnie would bring a band with them, and they'd spin those 45s, and you'd hear all those records, and that's how people started to see bands, and how bands got to learn how to perform.
Yeah.
I mean, my early years pre-Orpheus were playing in a cover band, and we played all of those CYOs. Without those CYOs, none of us would have developed. Without those high school hops, the town halls, college mixers, I don't think that scene quite developed. It doesn't exist the same way that it did back then.
For sure.
Right?
Definitely. So moving on, you mentioned the
This is
music
the music trail.
and there are
Right.
several that are up there
Right.
now. And
Well,
I know
there are 3 that we've done. You have no idea how difficult it is to do one of these markers. I mean, it is extremely. It took us 4 years to do the Aerosmith marker. It took 4 years to do the Tea Party, because these venues aren't venues anymore.
No.
So you've got to go through the city. You've got to have at that time we were affiliated with the Historical Society of Boston, and you had to get approval from the city. You had to get approval from the building.
Yeah.
It
it's a
took
long
forever.
process.
And remember, that's in between living life for each of us, because it's really a volunteer effort. It's not a full-time endeavor.
Labor of love, for
It-
sure.
Passion
for
only,
sure.
passion.
Yeah. And then this is a
So
wonderful...
we've actually identified a number of other locations that are, I mean, it's difficult. Like I said, we've identified them, but going through all of the steps in order to get that where we put that marker up, it takes time. So the grant was for a half a dozen markers. We've done 3, and hopefully it won't be another 16 years before we get the next 3 up there.
I doubt it. And then this next page on education just speaks to the richness, especially in the Boston area,
Absolutely.
of attracting wonderful people in the music industry to come and learn more and develop themselves as artists.
Well, Berkeley and the Boston Conservatory have turned out some of the greatest artists. I mean, there are so many artists that started there that are now touring the world. I mean, I have a friend he came from Somerville. He went over there and took bass lessons, and he has been living in Los Angeles, and he's been playing with Bonnie Raitt for over 30 years.
Wow.
And he has done sessions with everybody. And it all started right there.
Yeah.
A young guy with a dream and passion and commitment who wants to educate himself. That's where he goes, and he learns. And
we mentioned the YouTube page, which probably is worth just spending a quick second reiterating, since it gets at, I think, one of the real thrusts of your interest in this is getting people to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
That it's open to everybody, where they share reflections of, as you said, going to a concert or some encounter with a musician or a venue.
Right. A lot of these locations, and I'm looking at them right now, I mean, the Surf was a tremendous place. Doesn't exist anymore. It was down in Hull. And the guy that wrote this, Len Sorelli, he talked about when he was in a band and he used to play there, and the band was quite popular at the time, and what it was like for him on a Saturday night to go there and know that he was going to be playing in front of 1,500 kids, because that was like, it was like Mecca. It was like you go to these places, and that's what's sad about the scene, if you will, today. There aren't those kind of clubs like back then. It was fresh. Now, I'm sure it's fresh for a generation of 18-year-olds today, but there's not the venues to go to and play. And so he's recounting how special it was for him to go and see a band and to play there. There are other people that talk about what it was like to go to those record hops. I mean, each one of them, you know, their adventures. The Schaefer Music Festival was an enormous festival at Harvard Stadium. Summer thing. These are situations that were magnificent because it brought the arts to the community. It brought music, the arts to the community. And I guess it's relative, but it was fairly affordable at like $4 or $5. You know.
You know, while now the museum is online, virtual,
it is.
I know your hopes and dreams is to have an actual museum, brick and mortar museum. What is sort of the process involved in that, and where do you see that going?
Good question. So it was a kind of three-pronged attack when we first started this. We thought of it as we didn't expect that this was going to take off right away, so we needed to plan it out. And the first step was to build a very extensive online archive, which we now have got that. Second prong of that attack was to do these markers, maybe do some exhibits in some places which we've looked at, haven't been able to put it together yet, but to do some exhibits. And thirdly, once you do things like that and you have a track history and it doesn't look like you're just a one-trick pony, I guess it's going to take going and getting donations and going after serious investors that would want to see a brick and mortar go up.
Well, speaking of that, how can people get involved, whether contributing or maybe adding to the museum themselves?
Well, we always need money. Every museum needs money, and everybody is always reaching out. So there is a mechanism on the homepage where you can reach out through PayPal and make a donation. It's all fully tax deductible, as it's a 501c3 federally recognized not-for-profit, and all the money goes back into the acquisitions of things. You know, one of the things that I actually didn't show you, I think that we were going to, I wanted you to know what else would go in this museum.
Right, exactly.
So when we go in, we have a museum, what we do is we actually put things like this in it. You know, what we're looking at here is this is a platinum record, and it was donated to us by people in the band The Cars. And The Cars, of course, have gone on to make lots of music, lots of successful. A platinum record, which is what this is, denotes sales of 1 million records, 1 million actual records. They do also issue gold records, which is 500,000 sales of records, and they also do them for cassettes, which is a medium that no longer exists.
Harry, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program.
Well, this has been
fascinating.
Thank you so much.
I know the viewers got a nice overview and going to be on the website immediately after the program.
Thanks.
Hopefully they can contribute either financially or with
content. YouTube stories. Those YouTube stories are important too. So
also want to thank those of you watching for joining us, and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. Already posted it.
Hey, Mom. I got the job.
Got the job. Welcome aboard.
I've got a job to do today.
Have a good first day at work, Mom.
Donate to Goodwill. Help provide job training in your